You know what? I did it. I finally did. The answer was staring at me right there, right in front of my face this whole time. It's the phones. You just got to stay off the phone. That's it. Right there. I solved every single mental health problem right there. I'll be taking my due compensation now. Happy holidays, everyone. Happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Christmas, Eve, day, the day after day, New Year's is somewhere in there, and whatever else I missed. So for today's video, I wanted to take a dive back into those more serious discussions. I wanted to take a look into the mental health of men, with a bit of that kind of pertaining a bit more to men here in the US, but can also be used in the general broader scope of men. I think this is a topic that's been receiving a bit more attention in recent years, especially with all of the dismantling of just how exactly growing up in our patriarchal societies can affect and contribute to creating the values and standards that our boys or men adhere to, whether for the better or worse. With the rise in reports of loneliness, depression, and certain violent acts from men, I figure it's worth looking into what exactly is going on here and why this is happening. So first off, I do believe that there's one particular point on this topic that's important to consider. With the increase in the support of mental health and its discussion, I'd say there's about two camps of men that have been placed in the spotlight. So on one side, you've got the men who are actively thinking about themselves, their future, and revere the importance of their mental health. And on the other side, you've got the men who don't really seem to care as much or just aren't really as open about the topic. These may be the boys or men who sometimes appear more stoic in nature or don't really provide themselves the chance to cry or show any other strong emotion, sometimes due to certain old rhetoric that's been tossed around at them. It is extremely important to remove the stigma that some people have against prioritizing your mental health and provide both men and women with the tools and abilities to get the help that they need. But when it comes to some men, it's still kind of undeniable that even with the tools and abilities available, we still choose not to use them and instead look to self-medicate in order to get through tough times, whether it's through any sort of substance use, alcohol, or other third-party alternative. This, in part, is due to some men being conditioned not to actively seek out therapy or support groups or even consulting friends for assistance with their mental health. And it's this issue of also not seeking medical or professional help that can also lead to both boys and men being underdiagnosed in a number of disorders, such as eating disorders or even depression. So plenty of boys are conditioned from childhood on just what exactly it means to be a man, whether it be through your parents or culture or media or what have you. And the negative side of that is that it also may include learning to repress emotions or certain identities and not actively seek out assistance when going through periods of anxiety, depression, loneliness, or isolation, which all doesn't really contribute to good emotional intelligence or just actively expressing how you feel. You just kind of gotta man up and walk with pride, is all they say. There's also this sort of elevated encouragement of romantic or sexual conquest in hypermasculinity, to where we're encouraged to be with or kind of sleep around with as many girls or women as possible, regardless of even who that's with or if that relationship is actually even appropriate. And I think this is also where living in a heteronormative society can play a part in sort of suppressing homosexuality as acceptable in men, kind of leading to another slew of mental health issues for men who might identify as such. So I would personally assume that it's this hyper masculinity that partially plays a role into why there exists a bit of stigma against some men who are late bloomers in the areas of both dating and more sensual, I guess, activity. And I think this also kind of feeds into creating the nice guy trope, where some guys will see relationships as completely transactional. I think this also starts to get us more into why some men may feel the need to partner themselves with groups such as incels or red pills or the manosphere, but we won't be getting into that right now. Shifting back to mental health, studies commonly show that it's usually around the holiday season that we see reports of loneliness, depression, and suicides on the rise. When it comes to the issue of suicide, a majority of the victims are reported to be men, many of which are successful in their attempts to claim their life. At least here in the US, the highest rates appear to be among white men, followed by Native American and then black men. And the rates are also rather high for older men aged over 65 than any other age group. Another part of this story that's always important to consider is the why behind these. Many of the complaints that I've heard or read men airing out that seem to contribute to this emotional unwell being have reportedly stemmed from not feeling as if they have a space to express themselves, difficulty understanding how to properly express their feelings, feeling inadequate in their masculinity or roles as a father or husband, struggling to pursue or maintain a lasting friendship or relationship, difficulties in work or finance, or just feelings of insignificance in life. Sprinkle that with some of the stigma mentioned earlier that some men face about tackling their mental health, and you've got a recipe for disaster. Although I would kind of still argue that the stigma is being more and more erased. You'll start thinking, oh man, this depression pack, nah, it ain't hitting. I'm finally starting to feel good, not knowing it's just creeping around the corner, ready to just take you down and ruin your day. I'm reminded of a quote that I saw some time ago that said something very profound that stuck with me. And it said, if suicide ever crosses your mind, just know I'd rather hear your story than attend your funeral. I think this can be one of the hardest topics for people to project just because of how serious it is. And I think this is also why it's good to have people who are willing to check up on you when you're sad, even when you don't know how to project yourself or how you're feeling in the moment, or even just have people who are willing to check up on you just at random times in the day, rather than having no one there at all for you. The thought of ending it all can sometimes leave one feeling rather guilty, especially due to the people that you'd be leaving behind. For the case of the guys, you're likely someone's dad, son, brother, uncle, friend, so on and so forth. And when you start to think about that feeling that you're leaving behind for people, if you were to ever go along with things, it can be rather painful. So in all of these cases, I think it is nice to really see that general conversation of mental health moving towards the forefront of discussion in our societies today, because it really is no small or simple matter. I've taken the time to analyze a few of my issues and concerns regarding my own mental health, as I've personally had a lot to consider, especially in more recent years. Now, for me, I've personally had to battle with a few things, like, for one, trying to find or build trust in people to the point that I feel comfortable enough to truly vent about my issues. What I mean by that is I noticed for a majority of my life, I didn't really find it very comforting to get deep about explaining or expressing my deeper troubles or worries with people. So, in a nutshell, just trust issues. I worry about insecurities finding its way into someone else's conversation, or someone somehow finding ways to use my own expressed issues against me. So another problem is that I've usually found it very strange to just present a very challenging discussion about my emotions to someone one day, and then the next day just act like everything's okay. I also just don't think I like the idea of presenting issues or problems about myself that would cause people around me to worry, especially friends. It may sound a bit strange, but I just don't really like the idea of having my friends having something to worry about me. I just don't like giving my friends a reason to, but at the same time, what are friends for, right? Like, when it comes to the case of having friends to care for your mental health, I kind of think that they're a great example of that quote, you never really know what you have until it's gone. Because you gotta be happy for the friends and the people who are willing to extend an ear and listen to you about your issues. You never know when some of their advice is gonna come in handy. See, sometimes your friends just being there and giving them the opportunity to listen to you vent is enough. You just gotta have someone ask you, where you at, man? My limit. I'm at my limit. But thank you for asking. One other bit about my mental health that I found very intriguing to analyze, more notably this year, is crying. Because, like, I don't cry very often. And it's not because I was told, like, boys don't cry by my parents when I was younger or anything. No. I just don't usually like to express that because it feels like a very emotionally charged occurrence. And I feel like I could probably honestly count the number of times that I cry in any given year. I've been working to be more expressive with that though, and I can gladly say that as of this year, I have cried to the ending of Encanto, Turning Red, and Spider-Man Miles Morales. Such masterpieces. If you didn't cry to those, what's going on? We need to talk. But you would probably be very hard pressed to find me crying in like a group of people, or even in like a one-on-one situation. It just feels like a very vulnerable time, and I would say that this often leads to a common state of me attempting to be more stoic or applying a more logical or rational or calm approach to a number of problems that come up in my life. But therein lies the issue, because it's not every situation that you come across in life that's going to require a logical approach. Sometimes your emotions are needed. So when I get into those circumstances that are more emotionally charged, like someone's passed away or someone's really hurt, I feel like I find myself trying to not be too expressive of emotion just so I can hide away some of that mental pain, which it starts to take a very heavy toll. I think that we all grieve in different ways, but bottling it up isn't always as smart as it might seem. So I think part of the issue in like the grand scheme of things is that I try to convince myself that I have all of my problems under control, sometimes through the use of like deflection, but then I have a serious conversation with myself and I start asking, do I really have it all sorted out, or am I just not trying to think about it? Actively avoiding your issues doesn't actually do anything to fix the situation or help yourself in the long term. That problem's likely bound to come back. Sometimes we even make up random fake scenarios in our head that actually just add to the problem, and it's times like this where I have to remind myself, like, you're making up fake scenarios in your head again, man, don't do that. Or you just can't get rid of that negative voice in your head. And I don't know if it's just me, but like, I'll even think about my problems and convince myself that, bro, it's not that deep. Even if the issue at hand is really bad, like, really, really bad. And I notice this can also be some very prominent coping mechanisms for other boys or men out there as well. I think it's something that's definitely worth kind of taking the time to analyze and looking into more. Now, if there's one thing that I have found to be very helpful in finding some form of expression, it's journaling. And oh, do I find that so very therapeutic to find some way to get my thoughts out. And it's almost like venting, but to myself. And in this case, at least there's no worry of trust issues ever coming into play. Unless, of course, you're ever worried about someone finding said journal. But let's not think about that, because it's just really nice to get your feelings out somewhere physical that you can look back on. Probably beats actually putting every detail of your life on Twitter. I've also found it most relaxing to just take walks or drives all by myself, alone with nothing but my thoughts and the swift breeze of nature. Even like cleaning around the house has its place sometimes, and that one seems more soothing in the ironic sense, considering the fact that I would be cleaning up whatever chaos is around the area. So all of this is to say, I would highly suggest just trying out new things and finding out whatever works for you when it comes to that idea of finding your peace. If ever deciding to come out and be frank with any sort of mental pain or ills that have been troubling you, I do still believe that it's important to be cautious first of who you're confiding in, because I don't think it's necessarily everyone who you should discuss every detail of your life with. Sometimes you don't truly know what someone thinks of you or their intentions. And second, gauging just how much trauma or woes you express to them. I do believe that it's fair to say there's a point to consider when it comes to talking about certain things with your friends and then leaving other details for therapy or other professionals. I think sometimes we can go through periods of expressing a lot to a person to the point that they really don't know how to handle it or don't really have the right words or solutions to that issue. For some of us, that idea of unconditional love tells us that the person who we express ourselves to should be willing to accept us fully and listen to and handle every single one of our concerns, but I'm not so sure that it's every friend or lover or acquaintance that we express ourselves to that will take us unconditionally. Which isn't to say that unconditional love doesn't exist or anything, or I'm not saying to drop your friends, but I am saying that I do believe there's still a sort of gauge to be made with how much exactly you express to someone and what they also may be able to handle. I want to end this video by saying, for the boys or men who are watching this, I do sincerely hope that you're able to find peace in whatever situations you're currently going through. I think it would be encouraging or beneficial to find that therapist, support group, or even circle of friends to confide in whenever you're down. These may not be that one-size-fits-all to your problems, but there are plenty of people who wish they'd search for them sooner. Sometimes even having those informal guy talks with other boys or men can be a real lifesaver. If you have any half-step or full dads, brothers, sons, nephews, cousins, granddads, and like whatever else there is, try extending an ear to them. Just being there for someone can make a world of difference. It's nice to see the effort put in, and it at least also shows that you care. At least it also shows that they were on your mind. But yeah, that's kind of all I have to say on this video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.